Oh, hey there. So when I was in college, and look, I don't like to talk about the fact that I went to college very much because I want people to think I'm dumber than I am. But when I was in college, my roommate was not amazing at talking to girls. And so he had to, on purpose, think about like, how do I talk to girls? And this is what he did, okay? And it seems silly, but I was like, that's very interesting. And I've actually used this for decades since because I'm old. So he just drew a big question mark on a piece of paper and put it by the phone. This is back when we had phones that were, like a landline. And I would see him talking to a girl and he'd be struggling or whatever. And he'd just look down at the paper and it's a question mark. And so whatever she said, whatever her last sentence was, he would just go, oh, tell me about that. And he would make it into a question. Because if you ask just like a yes or no question, then they can just say yes or no, and then that's the end of it. It doesn't really breed conversation. However, if you ask an open-ended conversation, then all of a sudden she's talking about herself. And everybody's favorite name in the world is their own name, and everybody's favorite topic is themselves. And so if you give them the opportunity to just, hey, you can talk and I'll listen and I will be interested, then girls actually like that. In fact, people in general, just like that. And so no matter what it was, whatever the last thing was that she said, he would just go, oh, and they would ask a question about that. Now, I'll give you an example of how I used this just this last week. We had an inspection on a house that we're flipping, and the inspector was pretty tough. And I knew that he was going to be tough, and he had been tough several times and stalled our job for a month and then got very strict about things. So he showed up and I was just like, I need to get this conversation away from what I'm doing and into anything else. And so he got there and I was like, hey, how was your weekend? And he's like, oh, pretty good. Got to see the grandkids. I'm like, oh, how many grandkids do you have? And he's like, 3. And they never stop. They're just yelling all the time. I'm like, it's nice to be able to give them back, huh? He goes, yeah. I was like, how many kids do you have? He goes, oh, I have 2. And I was like, really? How old are they? And he's like, they're 23 and 21. I was like, oh man, those are good ages. They're finally out of the house and doing some cool things. And he goes, yeah, my son, he's an inspector for meat factories. I was like, how many meat factories are there in Texas? And he goes, well, his section is, and he told me the section like Northeast Texas. And I was like, are there really that many meat factories? And he goes, oh yeah. And then he starts telling me about stuff. And I was like, and how does that work? Like, I don't think I could do that job. It would be very hard. And he goes, oh man, they got machines that do everything, do the kill floors, very automated and all this stuff. The machine guts them and another one takes them and all this. I was like, wow. And then what happens? And I just kept him going for, 20 or 30 minutes. And I could tell he was like, but I really have to look at this stuff. And I just kept going. And then they clean them ahead of time, like before they kill them? He's like, oh yeah, there's a whole thing. It sprays them and rinses them off and all this. I was like, man, that's actually pretty smart. He's like, yeah, I was like, and he's got to inspect those all the time. He goes, every time they kill something. And I was like, how often is that? And they told me, and I was just like, man, I don't think I could do that. And finally he looks around and he just goes, you guys are good to go, and gives us a green tag. And I was like, thank you. And that's how it's done, okay? So if you're having a hard time talking to girls, which I don't know, I don't think anybody can talk to anybody anymore because everybody's online, but try that. Big question mark. Whatever the last thing was they said, you ask a question about that. Hopefully that helps you out. Love you guys. Bye.